couple thank yous real quick to our front boosters. So clap out to our front boosters. For our administrators for being so supportive. For our tech crew, yay, give it up for our tech crew. And a big warm thank you to Mrs. Ank and Mr. Anderson. Hours and hours of work. And then I'm going to give a shout out to my first hour class. Hey. So today we have a special period for you, hopefully special. It will be. And it's former Friend students who are now teachers at Friend High School. So first up is Mr. Bertoni from the math department. Yeah.
In December 1994, a few months before the very first Writers' Week, 3 scientists discovered a cave in the south of France that contains some of the oldest prehistoric cave art on the planet. Radiocarbon dating estimates that humans painted these works of art approximately 30,000 years ago. Think about that for a second. 30,000 years ago. Just to put that number into perspective, cave lions, cave bears, and woolly rhinoceros inhabited the Europe of 30,000 years ago. The cave art these scientists discovered is 25,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids. It is also 25,000 years older than the Proto-Indo-European language that would eventually evolve into languages such as German, English, Russian, Farsi, Hindu, and modern French. This means that we have no idea what these early humans spoke while they were seeking shelter in that cave in the south of France. The world these humans lived in and the lives they led looked very, very different from what we're familiar with today. But the art they left behind is a reminder that they shared something in common with us. They were creative. They made art. They had a need to express themselves and connect with other human beings. They wanted to leave something behind for future generations to remember them by. I don't know much about our prehistoric ancestors, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch to hypothesize that they were motivated by the same innate human need that led to the creation of Writers' Week in April of 1995. Those ancient humans ground up ochre, it's a pigment created from red clay, and they ground it into a fine powder and used it to paint horses, bears, lions, and other Paleolithic-era animals on the walls of the cave. They also used reeds to blow the powder over their outstretched hands, leaving striking handprints on the cave walls. Isn't it astonishing to think that there's a place on this planet that, in theory, they won't let you in, but in theory you could stand and press your fingers into the handprints of one of our human ancestors that lived 30,000 years ago. The art that we continued to create for tens of thousands of years after was surprisingly durable. Cave art, clay pottery, stone sculptures, metallic jewelry, cuneiform tablets, they're all on display in museums today. Under the right conditions, even papyrus scrolls and paper manuscripts can survive almost indefinitely. In contrast, when I was around your age, I read an article that explained that we would soon enter a digital dark age. A trove of scientific data collected from the early moon missions that NASA stored on magnetic tape had already been lost. The magnetic tape degraded over time, and the machines used to read the tape had broken or been retired. The creative and academic works of millions of people who lived through the 1980s and 1990s is stuck on little floppy disks that can no longer be read on modern computers. Even if you did have a 3.5-inch floppy drive in your home, many of these disks have degraded so much that the corrupted data on them is beyond repair. Artists, musicians, photographers, and writers have lost entire bodies of work that was stored on now defunct social networks. And here's the irony of it all. 21st century human beings generate and store more data in a single day than we did for the first million years of our existence. But when historians and archaeologists of the future study the late 20th and early 21st century, the digital decay of our data might mean that they will know less about us than the generations that came before of us and the generations that will come after. As a slightly anxious teenager, I took these warnings very seriously. In the early 2000s, I transferred all of my floppy disks of Word documents to a backup hard drive. After that, I continued to back up all of my AOL instant messages, some of you know what those are, digital photos, and treasured documents onto the same hard drive. Then I even made a backup of my backup hard drive. Finally, when Google Drive was launched in 2012, I uploaded all of my files to the cloud. Why am I bringing this up? Well, because it's the 25th anniversary of Writers Week, and I actually have digital copies of the poems that I read on this stage when I was a student. So my great idea was I thought it would be fun to read one of those old poems on this same stage 20 years later. Then I went back and reread the poems. Do you know that sinking feeling you get in your gut when you go back and read a journal entry that you wrote when you were in 7th grade? It was kind of like that, but much, much worse. So those poems get to stay on my backup hard drive. I still treasure them, but I'm not reading them today. But then I thought about it, and eventually I came to the realization that it doesn't really matter what poetry I wrote when I was in high school. It doesn't matter if it was good or bad. That was never the point. For 25 years, students, teachers, and authors have done the same thing those early humans did when they created works of art in that cave in the south of France. Writers Week has given generations of Fremd High School students permission to be creative, permission to express ourselves, permission to let our guard down and open up to each other, permission to put our thoughts, fears, desires, and experiences into writing, permission to create and share works of art. When you ask a Fremd High School graduate what makes this place special, you'll hear a lot of insightful answers. But one answer that you'll hear over and over again is Writers Week. I'm very grateful that I was given the opportunity to stand on this stage 20 years ago, and I'm grateful that I was given the opportunity to read again today at Writers Week 25. Thank you.
Mr. Bertoni, he's the best, right? I'm going to also tell a story from high school. It was February of 1996, a few short weeks after Fremd's second ever Writers Week. A school night, and our practice ended at 9. I didn't leave with my teammates, though, because I had left my physics homework in my locker upstairs, and I didn't want to face Zimmelzak's wrath the next day. The building was empty, except for the second floor custodian driving the carpet Zamboni. We smiled as we passed each other in the hallway. I grabbed my homework, stuffed it in my bag, and headed back to the gym exit to where my car was parked. During the 2 hours I had been in practice, the snow had transformed from a light flurry to a blizzard, covering the ground and my car with several inches of heavy white snow. By this point, my car was the only one in the back lot, the only lump under the snow blanket besides the row of buses parked against the tennis courts. Instead of resembling triangles or rectangles of carrot cake like the buses, my all-white 80s station wagon disappeared in the snow. It took a second for my eyes to adjust before I located her. My family's Oldsmobile station wagon put the old in Oldsmobile, and it had miles and miles on it. By the time I inherited it from my older sister, 2 of the windows, which were manual to begin with, wouldn't roll down, and the radio only worked after I hit a pothole, curb, or kid. The jolt sending the unreliable antenna out of its socket to soak in the radio waves. We'd cheer and sing along to ABBA until the next jolt caused the antenna to hide again. This portrayal is not an exaggeration. When my dad tried to trade the car in, the dealership offered him $25 for it, which, if you adjust for inflation, is $39.60 in today's money, roughly the cost of 5 Chipotle burritos. The white beast of a car was a junker, but I didn't care. I appreciated having a car to drive, even, or maybe especially because it was a jalopy. Anyways, I fired her up, the engine roaring to life before I stepped out to brush the snow that was coming down so hard that it accumulated seconds after I stopped brushing. I backed the car out of the space and then shifted to drive. But the car didn't move forward. I gave it a little more gas. Nothing. I put the car back in reverse and pressed hard on the gas, thinking I was stuck in a slush trench and just needed to get my tires onto a sturdier spot. To my surprise, the car hustled backwards again without a problem. So I thought optimistically, okay, so maybe this was just a weird fluke. So I shifted back to drive, expecting that somehow, magically, the car had worked out whatever glitch it had. but it hadn't because the car still didn't budge, not even an inch. I got out of the car searching the front and back tires for the problem, but everything seemed fine. One last attempt, I tried again. Shift to drive, press the gas, zilch, nothing. Now, I would like to tell you that at this point I considered all reasonable and responsible options, like going back inside to call my parents for a ride from the payphone, or leaving the defunct car in the parking lot and walking the 0.8-mile distance between Frem and my home. But I don't remember considering any of those options because there was an obvious solution that didn't involve bothering anyone else or losing a finger to frostbite. So I drove home, backwards. Navigating around the speed bumps in the back lot gave me just enough practice to feel confident making a right turn, or maybe it would be left, out of the front parking lot onto Illinois Avenue. Because of the late time and the snowy conditions, there weren't many other cars on the road. There was one car that flashed their brights at me as we were stopped on opposite sides of the red light at Quentin, Illinois. I pumped my brakes back at them to signal I was okay. There was another car who pulled up behind me / in front of me while I was stopped at the same light, the hoods of our cars looking like two dogs greeting each other. The driver and I made uncomfortable eye contact as I shrugged with a "what's a girl to do" expression in the seconds before the light changed to green in my rearview mirror. Luckily, that car decided not to follow me through the intersection, so for the rest of my journey home, I only encountered one other car that passed me on Illinois as I waited to turn onto Bennett Avenue across from Birchwood. I'm sure the people in that car assumed my car had ended up facing in the wrong direction as a result of sliding and spinning in the snow. Little did they know I had been driving backwards for over a half mile. And had they been paying closer attention, they might have noticed that I'd even turned on my right blinker to indicate the left turn. Because, you gotta follow the rules of the road. Safety first. I made it home, parked the car in the street, strolled into my house. I brushed off my parents' greetings in a hurry to get to my room and put the ordeal behind me. As I walked into my room, I turned quickly to my parents and said, "Oh, by the way, the car's broken. You'll probably need to get a new one." My dad, with a look of shock on his face, said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. What's wrong with the car? How'd you get home? Back this up a minute." And I replied, "Back this up? I already did. All the way home, Pops." I tossed him a wink and closed the door behind me. Thank you. Next up, Mr. Graba.
Good morning. A shout out to my anatomy kids who were here. I think I saw them over there. All right, so several weeks ago, Miss Marsh approached me and asked me if I'd speak at Writers Week this year since it was the 25th anniversary of Writers Week, to which I promptly replied, "No thanks." However, not being one to take no for an answer, Miss Marsh kept persisting, nevertheless. And so, here I am. I actually graduated in the class of 1994, so my senior year was the first year ever of Writers Week. Two of the teachers who were responsible for starting Writers Week, Mr. Anderson, not the one who's here now, and Mr. Romano, were actually two of my English teachers here at Fremd. They were without question two of the more influential teachers I had during my 4 years walking these halls as a student. They encouraged me to write about what I knew and to read things that interested me. So I kind of feel like I have to apologize to them for the amount of papers they read about baseball and fishing. As I was trying to figure out what to write about for Writers Week, because I'll be honest, I don't do a whole lot of writing on my own anymore, I asked my son Jack what he thought I should write about or talk about. He said to maybe just give some advice, which I found ironic, coming from my own son, who doesn't usually want my advice at this stage of his life. But I decided to go with it since he actually seemed to want to hear it, and I do think he's in the audience right now. Understanding the advice I'm going to give, though, requires knowing a little bit about my background. So, as a kid and even as a young adult, I was always a box checker, always checking off one accomplishment to move on to the next. In elementary school, I got good grades, check. Made it in the gifted program, check. Didn't get into trouble, check. In high school, I remember walking onto the bus my first day of school, my freshman year, and thinking, all right, now this really counts. I thought to myself, how well I do now is going to determine how successful I'm going to be in the future. So I had two goals for freshman year: get A's in my classes and make the freshman baseball team. I was in all honors classes freshman year. I got straight A's except for a B+ in accelerated geometry. Darn math teachers. first semester of freshman year. So check. I made the freshman baseball team, even though about 80 kids tried out that year. Another check. Sophomore year, same goals, same results. All A's except for a B+ in Accelerated Algebra 2. And I made the sophomore baseball team. Check. Junior year, same goals, same results, except I got straight A's and made the varsity baseball team. Another check. Senior year, I added a couple of goals. I wanted to get accepted into a good college and earn an academic scholarship. I got straight A's. Check. Made the varsity baseball team. Started at first base. Check. Got accepted into Illinois Wesleyan University in Bloomington. Check. And earned a National Merit Scholarship. Check. College went much the same for me. I had a goal of earning good grades, graduating in 4 years, and getting a good job. Check, check, check. I was hired to teach a full-time position in the fall of 1998 when I was 22 years old. That involved spending my mornings teaching biology and chemistry here at Friend, and my afternoons teaching physical science at Palatine High School. And you may not know it, but that was a really good teaching job for someone coming right out of college. Having gotten good grades and been a good student in high school also helped me get that job, as my AP biology teacher, Miss Matson, and a teacher many of you may know, Mr. Palmer, helped bring me to the attention of Mr. Grimm, the science department chairman who hired me. So checking boxes had helped me get pretty far pretty quickly in my life. So once my professional boxes had been checked, I had a couple of personal boxes to check off. The first was to meet a nice girl, fall in love, and get married. I happened to get really lucky and meet a girl during my first year of teaching. She was a biology and chemistry teacher at Palatine High School. We started dating on October 23rd in 1998. That's Mole Day for anybody in chemistry. And we were married in June of 2000. Check. We bought our first house in 2001. Check. She gave birth to our first child, Jack, on February 26, 2003, the day before I would turn 27. We were on our way to checking that 2.5 kids and 1 dog box for our family. 6 weeks later, though, the box checking stopped. My wife had been experiencing severe back pain and side pain and night sweats that had all been attributed to her pregnancy by her OBGYN. When we took her to see her primary care physician, he had her admitted to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with metastatic pancreatic cancer. That means the cancer had spread from her pancreas, and the place it had spread to was her liver. So 4 weeks later, she passed away. And all of a sudden, I was a 27-year-old single father, and the first time I'd ever held or fed a baby was when Jack was born 10 weeks earlier. So all that box checking I'd been doing didn't seem so important anymore. The experiences I'd passed up to make sure I checked all those boxes, the experiences my wife had passed up to check all those boxes, they didn't seem so important anymore either. What was important, though, was my family and this school. My parents and my wife's parents helped me take care of Jack. Some of my students would come babysit so I could get out of the house every once in a while. The teachers at Friend donated money to help pay for funeral expenses and start a college fund for Jack. Mr. Zimmelzak, Mr. Schroeder, and Mr. Adcock got me out of the house and onto the golf course to get my mind off of everything for a little while. Mr. Weaver and Mr. Higgins would watch Jack for me sometimes so I could kind of put myself back together. And you know what? I learned something from going through all of that. I learned that checking boxes isn't as important as I thought it was. I learned that the people in my life matter a whole lot more than the boxes I checked along the way. Without the people who were there for me when I needed them, I don't know where I would be today. I also learned that truly experiencing life, not just checking a box to reach the next milestone, is what's important. I learned that if an opportunity comes along to do something you've always wanted to do, grab that opportunity. Go see that baseball game, go see that play, go to that concert, go travel to that place you always wanted to go see that Cubs World Series parade. Take a chance and go talk to that girl or boy you've been wanting to talk to. In the immortal words of Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Life for me has moved on. I'm happily remarried and have a wonderful, almost 11-year-old son with my wife, and she has encouraged me to go see and do things I wouldn't have done before, and I've embraced most of them with open arms, except for dancing. I really don't like dancing, mostly because I'm terrible at it. But I haven't forgotten the lessons I learned from my experience, and I hope you won't either. Don't just be a box checker with the time you have in this life. Experience it. Thank you.
Morning. Wow. Tough acts to follow. I too initially refused to speak, but when the schedule came out and my name was on it, my students asked, "You're speaking?" I said, "I Yes. So I'll be brief, I promise. But I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak at this prestigious event, Writers Week. I am neither a professional writer nor author, so I feel honored to have been asked. The weather must have scared away all the crows, so I'm trying to fill in some space. But I'm an introvert by nature, so I might be a little nervous standing before you, and my iWatch says my beats per minute about 115, so yes, I am. The last time I stood on this stage in front of a crowd this large was nearly 30 years ago as a high school senior. I was in a group of athletes that was asked by orchestras to join them in performing in their spring dance show. I got moves like Jagger. In this show, we would perform a montage of 1950s dances. So there I was, right here in the front row, doing the jitterbug, hand jive, and a couple others. At the conclusion of the show, a feeling of great relief came over me because I didn't trip, I didn't fall off the stage. A friend of mine approached me and congratulated me and said, "Hey, great job, but did you know you have a hole in your pants?" Sure enough, he was right. I had a hole in the crotch of my jeans. Yep, there I was in the front row. It's hard to believe how fast those 30 years have gone, only to be reminded that I am old as I receive messages from former classmates about the planning of the upcoming 30-year reunion. Friend then, as it is now, was a great place to be a student. I had two older brothers who preceded me here at Friend, so it made the transition a little bit easier from junior high to high school. As a freshman, I was a three-sport athlete, participating in football, basketball, and baseball. The week before our last game of football, I injured my neck in practice. After being hauled away in an ambulance, spending the night in the hospital, and wearing a neck brace for a week, my football career was over. During basketball season, I broke my ankle in practice. I was relegated to the end of the bench after spending 6 weeks in a cast. I did, however, end up shooting 100% from the free throw line. I was 2 for 2 that season. That was pretty much the end of the basketball experience. I made it through the baseball season healthy and continued playing over the next 3 years, making all area my senior year, and was fortunate to go on and play at Eastern Illinois University. In the 30 years since graduating from Friend, there of course have been some changes, but what hasn't changed, it's still a great place to be. When I first started here as a teacher, it was a little strange being a colleague of my former teachers and calling them by their first names. Most of them have moved on to greener pastures, retiring. There are still a few members of the staff that were here 30 years ago. Mrs. Kirby, Mr. Bruce, who I like to remind every so often that I was a student of his, and Mr. Mozak, who was a teacher's assistant at the time, and I would school in three-point shooting contests after PE class every day. You hear, Mr. Mozak? The building has changed too. The media center, as you know, underwent a makeover not too long ago. The football field has an artificial surface. The pool, where we learned how to scuba dive, has been reconfigured. And the softball and baseball fields have finally been upgraded that we actually hope to use this spring. The bleachers in the gym went from rickety old wooden bleachers to what you see today, where the science department and all its classrooms are. Once stood a courtyard where students could hang out during lunch, and ducks would return from year to year to lay their eggs. Maybe the biggest change was a smoking area for students that was located outside the back of the building. Yes, students with parental permission were allowed to go outside and smoke, but that changed when the legal age changed to 18. That made Friend a better place. Today we offer more dual credit and AP classes than ever before. The way you are graded has even changed. I may be mistaken, but I may have overheard some students refer to that as the Friend 350. You guys know what we're talking about? I don't know. Class rank used to be on report cards, but that's okay, that's progress, and Friend is still a good place to be. When I graduated from Friend and entered college as a business student, I soon changed my major to physical education and health. I knew someday I wanted to return to Friend and hopefully have an impact as a teacher and a coach like my teachers and coaches had on me. For those seniors out there saying, "I can't wait to get out of here and never come back," you'll be some of the first to come back and visit your teachers. You'll do this because you'll realize that Friend was a great place to be a student. For the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, there's still plenty of time to get involved in all the things Fremd has to offer. Over 30 activities and clubs, and just as many athletic teams. Go to an event that you haven't been to before and support each other. Your time here is short and it goes quickly. Make the most of it and realize Fremd is a great place to be. Thank you.
All right. Good morning. I too am shocked that I'm on this stage for many reasons. First, when I was you guys, I would never in a million years believe that I'd be on this stage teaching at Fremd, but here I am. So here we go. Okay, so this year it's my 20-year high school reunion. I know, it's hard to believe, right? With that being the case, I've decided to take this opportunity to reflect on some memorable moments from high school and share them with you. I have many fond memories of my classmates, teachers, and the lovely orange carpet and puke green lockers that grace the hallways of Fremd High School. I remember Mr. Palmer's world history class my freshman year, and Mr. Wodlowski's econ class my senior year. I remember meeting that new soccer coach my junior year. We called him Keller. I wasn't sure about him, but I was impressed with his girlfriend because she was on the U.S. Olympic soccer team. I, of course, have some not so positive memories as well, like when my car got towed from the Fremd parking lot. Yes, parking was still an issue 20 years ago. And when some boys were using a crutch as a baseball bat during PE and I was hit in the head with a tennis ball in front of multiple PE classes. That was embarrassing. Most of my memories are tied to my involvement in sports, as I spent a lot of my 4 years here at Fremd in gyms, running hallways, and on the soccer field. So I'm going to share some of those memories with you. I clearly remember events like when Mr. Weaver didn't let me play in my first high school basketball game because I forgot my shoes at home. This was even after I called my mom, Collect, asking her to bring them to the game. I never forgot my shoes again. When the late Mr. Krager pulled me aside the next year when I decided to quit basketball, asking me not to think of what Fremd basketball could do for me, but rather what I could do for Fremd basketball. This conversation didn't change my decision about basketball, but I left the meeting wondering if this man was serious or if he was joking. I would later come to understand this man's dry sense of humor and kindness for his students, as he would overlook that decision I made as a 16-year-old and hire me here at Fremd High School as a business education teacher. I also remember the thrill of being a boys soccer manager, sitting on the sidelines next to an injured Mr. Jonas, a stadium packed with cheering students as they won the state championship. And then, of course, I remember all those seasons at Fremd that I played with teammates like Miss Marsh and Mrs. Medina, as Coach P would yell from the sidelines, "Run, Raven, run," in his Italian accent. Though I personally do not have any high school state championships under my belt, I do remember one goal I scored off a free kick, ending St. Charles High School's 88-game winning streak. So there's that. So with all these memories, the most impactful moment occurred outside the weight room near the back gym. I can still picture it now. It was an early spring day. I was in soccer PE, which was co-ed at the time, and one of the best players on the boys team pulled me outside of the weight room and asked me if we could talk. I had no clue what he wanted to talk about, but I remember the conversation going something like this. "So Matt likes you and wants to go on a date with you. Are you interested?" I was sort of taken aback, as I'd barely spoken a meaningful word to this boy named Matt, and as far as I could remember, we were actually on the same soccer team as a little kid, but that was pretty much the extent of it. In the fall, I would practice as the boys manager. I'd practice with the team, and whenever Matt got the ball, I would sort of move away in fear that he would run me over. He was not a graceful player, but tough. He was also a wrestler, which is a sport I didn't really understand. On top of that, I'm pretty sure he was the one who hit me in the head with the tennis ball in PE earlier that year. Maybe it was the spring in the air, or maybe it was the smell of the weight room, which made me want to end that conversation, but I was intrigued. Matt seemed nice and also fun, smart, yet laid back, and played soccer, which at the time seemed like a bonus. About a week later, we saw Goodwill Hunting at the Barrington AMC. Then he came over to my house and we watched Ordinary People, which I just finished reading in English class. And then we went to prom together. So this moment outside the weight room during soccer PE may not have seemed like a big deal. And to be honest, at the time, it was more awkward than memorable. And I assumed it was just like any other high school experience, one that I would embrace and survive. So you may be asking yourself, why was this my most impactful moment from high school? Well, this boy, the one who embarrassed me in PE, scared me on the soccer field, and had his friend ask me out on a date. His name was Matt Monticello, and he's now the father of my two adorable, not graceful, but tough and smart little boys. So I leave you with this, future fellow Fremd alumni, students. You never know what opportunities will come your way or where your decisions will lead you. Mine certainly, I didn't think they would lead me here. But when you come across an open door, don't be afraid to peek inside. You might like what you find on the other side.
Hi. Yeah. I don't have a classes period, but to all my students from other classes, shout out. Okay. I haven't puked, passed out, or peed my pants yet, so it's a win. And before I begin, I'd also like to say that I told Marsh no, but apparently that doesn't work because your name just shows up in the program. But she's really doing Miss Ank's betting, and who can successfully say no to Gina Ank? Nobody. So here we go. So I was in quite a pickle because I had no idea what I was going to share. So I decided to share something I already knew was bad, because then you can judge it as terrible all you want. What I'm going to share is a play I wrote at Fremd when I was a freshman. Yes, you heard that right. I saved a play in paper format for 19 years. You must be thinking, dang, that must be a pretty good play. And in my mind, I think I thought that too, because not to brag, I got an A+. But memory is a funny thing, and the reality is that this play is just so bad. So I thought that if I'm going to embarrass myself, I might as well go all out. And thankfully, I have some incredible colleagues who agreed to help me by acting the play out. So thank you, Schomer, Kohler, Anderson, Klingner, and Dawson. And now, without further ado, my play that I wrote as a freshman in high school titled The Party. Yep, okay. Act 1, Scene 1. And don't worry, you don't have to suffer too long because it's only a 2-scene play. Chair seat. Okay. So yeah, okay. Oh, okay.
There you go. Thank God Judy Klingner's got some background here. Yeah. Can you make sure this one's on? Yeah, pull at the top. And you guys don't trip. Okay. Did you hear that? Somebody goes, this is going to be good. Oh, yeah. Russ? It's really not. Coach Klingner?
We're off to a good start.
Oh, God.
I know. Oh, yeah.
Oh, hey.
All right, because you got to hear this.
Yeah. Yeah. No?
Was.
Oh, there it is.
Ooh. Yeah. There we go. Like, okay. It was the party of the year, and everyone who was in it. It's bad enough, and now I get this like mic. Okay, it was the party of the year, and anyone would be there. It was to be at Preston Matthews' house. Okay, yeah, that's a good name. Camden Riley and Kat Patterson couldn't wait for the party. They were very social, lively girls and loved parties. They were also best friends. Listen to that characterization. As the few moments counted down to the time of the party, Camden and Kat made sure their hair, outfits, and makeup were just right.
Are you almost ready, Kat? Yeah, just making the final touches. Well, hurry up. We don't want to be too late.
Finally, they were ready, and they both ran down the stairs and opened the door. Run down the stairs and open the door. To the car with the door slamming behind them. They got into the car and sped off.
You're not driving, though. I'm driving. So are you ready for the party?
Of course, you know me.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun.
They reached Preston's house and got out of the car, and they started to approach the house. When they got into the house, many people were already there, and the music was blaring. The house was packed.
Hey guys, glad you could come.
Kat says sarcastically.
Hello, and missed the biggest party of the year? Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, have a great time. Talk to you guys later.
Bye, Preston. Let's not waste time. We have to catch up on the party. We've already missed so much.
Let's go mingle and dance.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, because they would really say, let's go mingle and dance. All right, the party went on, and the girls were enjoying themselves very much. The girls also became very hungry. So they went and talked to Miss Matthews. Yes, Miss Matthews, the mom, was at the biggest party.
Hi, Miss Matthews. How are you doing?
Hi, girls. How are you ladies doing tonight? How's the party going? Anyone causing trouble?
We're doing fine, and everyone is behaving themselves. Is there any way we can order some pizza? We're very hungry.
Oh, no problem. I'll get you the number.
He gets the number.
Here it is. Thank you very much.
Kat dials the number.
Hi, can I order 6 cheese pizzas for pickup? Thanks.
Quickest order ever.
How long will it take?
10 minutes. We should just leave now, since it'll take about 10 minutes to get there.
They tell everyone at the party they will be right back. Everyone cares. And they go to the car and drive off to the pizza shop. Because I was in like the 50s when I wrote this, and I called it the pizza shop. And by the way, they were so excited to get to this party, and they like immediately left and got pizza.
Yeah.
So, scene 2. They reached the shopping center where the pizza shop is located.
Oh, here we are.
Oh, sorry. She parks the car.
Let's go.
They get out and walk toward the pizza shop.
We're so totally being generous, leaving the party to get pizzas.
Yeah, but the party couldn't be fun now that we aren't there.
Exactly right.
And by the way, Kohler tried to change this line yesterday when we were practicing. Exactly right.
Yeah,
Yes, we should change it, but
No,
I think you tried to say
it stays as it
yeah.
is.
Like
Yeah,
yeah. So
I tried.
they walked past the convenience store. And Camden notices a man with a gun and a mask pointing the gun at the worker behind the counter. Her insides felt a wave of panic, and she had an implanted glare of shock frozen on her face. She felt the need to topple over and faint, but she kept walking. Kat was very confused as to why her friend was acting so strangely.
Kim, what's wrong?
Her head was faced forward, and she was walking at a faster pace. She said nervously.
Just keep walking. Don't turn your head. Please keep walking.
Kat hesitatingly turns her head. She turns it back and says apprehensively,
Too late! Oh no, he just wants the robber. Look straight at me. Oh my gosh, run! Run, run.
Hey, you girls! You better stop running, or else I'll shoot.
the girls stopped dead in their tracks.
Good. Now, lie down on the ground, and don't even think about turning around or running away.
The girls obey and lie face flat on the ground. They're now sobbing.
Now, count to 65, and don't even think of screaming.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
15 seconds later.
14, 15. Cam, what should we do? I think he's gone. On the count of 3, get up and get in the car.
What about the pizzas? What about the pizzas?
Are you even kidding me? 1, 2, 3, run. Oh, we already did.
They ran frantically to their car and hastily opened the doors and slammed them shut and locked the doors. Then Camden stomps on the pedal and his car screeches off out of the parking lot. After they get out of the parking lot, Camden drives them back to Preston's house, because that's where you go. When they got back to Preston's house, they were hysterical and could barely get the words out clearly.
We, robber, store, stop, robber saw us. He told us to drop or he would shoot, and then he left and we ran.
Finally, they got a couple sentences out. Miss Matthews realized what happened and she called the cops. Later, they were contacted by the cops, and the cops explained the whole situation. It seemed as though the robber was actually a friend of the convenience store, and the whole thing was just a joke. Okay, and the rest of this is just terrible narration, because I have a suspicion that this was supposed to be 4 pages long, and I was like, this dialogue has been so good, but I'm just going to stop it now and narrate straight the rest of the time. So it was very hard for Camden and Kat to grasp the concept of this whole situation as a funny joke. They felt as though their lives were endangered, and they were scared to death when the robbers stopped them in their tracks. Then, when they had the courage to go back to the party, they could barely get the words out about what they had just encountered and that their lives were threatened. And they had to deal with the embarrassment of the whole party, knowing that they were just the funniest part of a great big prank. It took them a while to understand this, but the so-called robber and the worker at the convenience store apologized, and it was all over and dismissed. Camden Riley and Kat Patterson had to let go of the fact that it was overall a joke. So, that's the end, and before you give me some pity applause, I'd like to point out what I know you all are thinking. This story has no point. Yeah, I know. But stories don't always have to have a point as long as they are entertaining, but since I failed on that account as well, I'd like to say what meaning I get out of this story. I had a teacher who believed in me and who made me feel good about myself, and she wasn't the only one. Whether it was Weaver, Schaefer, Mr. Higgins, or Mr. Patton, to name a few, I had teachers who made me feel valued and like I could achieve something better. Regardless of the petty drama in my personal life, I knew class could be an escape. I know that high school sometimes has a way of making you feel small and insignificant and undervalued and never good enough, but I hope you all have a teacher that makes you feel better than you may think of yourself. I wanted to be a teacher because as a friend student, I knew the power of an amazing teacher. So I hope you all have had and have a teacher or coach who has made you feel great enough that you'd want to preserve that feeling and carry it with you for at least 5 years. Woo.
And thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. I hope you enjoyed the show. And enjoy the rest of Writers Week, too. We got 2 more spectacular first hours to spend together. Woo!